Air reimagines the Virgin Suicide soundtrack on its 25th anniversary. Talks new music exiv. They say soundtracks are timeless. But what happens when the very people who made an iconic soundtrack confess that it never sounded the way it was supposed to? That's exactly the forbidden revelation behind Air's return to the Virgin Suicides on its 25th anniversary. And honestly, it blew my mind. Imagine a soundtrack that defined teenage melancholy for an entire generation, and then finding out the band that created it has secretly hated the way it sounded for 25 years. Do you hear the irony here? The music that fans treasured as perfection was something Nicolas Godin described as stomach, turning every single time he thought about it. So here's the shocking question. If we all thought it was perfect, what was so broken that they had to reimagine it from scratch? I'll admit, this hit me personally. I remember the first time I heard Playground Love. I was way too young to even grasp Coppola's dark fairy tale of suburbia, but that track played like the soundtrack of every unspoken teenage memory. And now Air is telling us, nope, it wasn't even the real version. That what we fell in love with was basically a compromise. So if that was a compromise, what secrets are hidden inside the version they've unleashed now? Because let's be clear, this isn't just a remaster. This is a full-on resurrection, a soundtrack literally pulled off the cold digital slab it was trapped on in 2000, and transferred into the warmth of analog tape. Why now? Why open the vault of forbidden knowledge after all these years? And what does it mean for Air's legacy, and even Coppola's? Here's the problem, and trust me, this is controversial. The Virgin Suicides wasn't just a soundtrack. It was Air's chance to prove they weren't just the dreamy French duo behind Moon Safari. But when they recorded it, they were broke. They were still using early digital equipment, clunky mixers, tech that they hated. Godin himself admitted the sound was metallic, lifeless, haunting him long after the film became a cult hit. The music that defined their reputation was in their own minds flawed beyond repair, and so for decades, fans celebrated what the band considered unfinished work. Now, before we dig into the forbidden secrets they revealed in this exclusive 25th anniversary edition, I want to pause for 1 second. If you love uncovering the kind of hidden truths, cultural mysteries, and cinematic secrets that everyone else ignores until it's too late, this is your channel. I'm Sofia, this is Breakdown Epic, and I'm telling you right now, subscribe. Not later, not when you, remember, right now, because I promise you, the next time a story like this explodes, you'll want to be here first, not playing catch up when everyone else is already talking about it. Alright, let's get back to Air's haunted obsession. So here's the reveal. Nicolas, Godin, and Benoît Dunckel didn't just tweak a few knobs for this reissue. They went back to the very DNA of the soundtrack. They stripped away the sterile digital crust, remixed the entire thing through a vintage NIV console from the 70s, and rebuilt the score in full analog warmth. This wasn't about casing money, even though cynics are already calling it a cash grab. This was about correcting history, about rewriting their own legacy. Godin admitted he literally couldn't move on, couldn't sleep, because every time he thought of the soundtrack, it felt wrong. Imagine living 25 years knowing your defining work never reflected your true vision. Here's where it gets wild. Air even confessed they didn't write the soundtrack for Coppola's film. They wrote it for the book. That's right. The music wasn't even aligned with the movie's tone. They were chasing Jeffrey Eugenides' much darker, more tragic novel. That's why the soundtrack feels off compared to the film's almost dreamy, pastel take. That's why it resonated so strangely. It wasn't meant to sit politely in the background. It was meant to haunt you, to disturb you, to make the suburbs sound dangerous. And now, with the Redux version, Air is doubling down on that intent. Let's pause for a second. I want you to think about this. If the Virgin Suicides had been released with this analog version of the soundtrack back in 2000, would it have changed the way people saw Coppola's film? Would it have been too heavy, too eerie, too off-kilter for mainstream audiences? And would the film even have reached cult status? Or would it have been buried as too weird for the time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is the kind of alternate history debate that could spark an entire series. But here's the real forbidden knowledge. Air was quietly rejecting Coppola's lighter vision all along. Godin straight up said it. The book was darker, the movie was softened, and Air, they didn't care. They wanted the soundtrack to feel wrong, to feel unnerving, like Bret Easton Ellis novels like Less Than Zero. This wasn't music for hotel lobbies anymore. This was music meant to make you shiver in your sleep. And that brings me to a hypothetical. Imagine you're a band riding the high of Moon Safari. Everyone loves you. Your music is playing in every lounge bar and boutique shop in the world. And suddenly you're asked to score a film about teenage suicide. Do you lean into the same dreamy vibe that made you famous? Or do you burn it all down and go darker, stranger, even if it alienates your fanbase? Be honest. What would you have done? Here's my self-deprecating confession. I probably would have caved. I'd be the coward saying, sure, let's do another Moon Safari, give the people what they want. But Air didn't. They risked it. And now, decades later, that risk is what keeps people obsessed. That's why we're still here talking about it. And that's why the Redux is more than just nostalgia. It's Air reclaiming the gutsy choice they made and amplifying it with the sound they always intended. And I know some of you are probably thinking, Sofia, it's just music. Why so dramatic? But that's the point. Music tied to cinema isn't just music, it's emotional architecture. and when the architecture is wrong, the building feels haunted forever. Air is basically exorcising the ghosts from their own creation. Now, here's where the tension really spikes. Because no matter how pure Air's intentions were, no matter how passionately Godin swears this reissue was about healing an old wound, some fans can't help but whisper, is this just a marketing stunt? Another anniversary, deluxe edition. Cash grab designed to squeeze nostalgia out of loyal listeners. And honestly, that's the forbidden conversation nobody wants to admit. How many times have we seen iconic bands release old work, slap on a remastered sticker, and rake in the money? Too many. So why should this be different? Here's my take, and it may shock you. This reissue had to happen, because Air never actually gave us the soundtrack they wanted to release. We've all been living with the wrong version for a quarter of a century. If they'd let it stay and touch it, their legacy would have been built on what they considered a mistake. That's not a cash grab. That's an act of survival. A desperate rewriting of history before the story calcifies forever. And you know what proves it? The bonus material. They didn't just clean up the old tracks and send them back out. They went deep into the vault demos, alternate cues, half-finished experiments. These are the raw puzzle pieces of how the soundtrack was built. It's like finding a secret diary tucked into the back of a book you thought you knew by heart. Suddenly, the entire story changes. Think about Suicide Underground. That track alone tells you this wasn't lounge music for sipping martinis. It's almost cinematic horror, referencing French film composer Francis Lai, but twisted into something unsettling. Air admitted they weren't even thinking about other composers. They were being led by their instruments, their gear, the keyboards and organs they'd impulsively bought in LA. That's not marketing polish. That's obsession. That's two guys trapped in their own fascination with sound, pushing it until it got strange enough to scare them. Now let's pull back and connect the dots. Godin confessed something most composers would never say out loud. Sometimes it's better not to listen to the director. He said obeying too much can drag you into bad ideas. That's forbidden knowledge in the world of film scoring, where directors usually reign supreme. And yet doesn't it make perfect sense? The Virgin Suicide soundtrack endures precisely because it didn't fit neatly into Coppola's edit. It was off. It was weird. It pushed viewers into another atmosphere. And honestly, isn't that why people still talk about it 25 years later, instead of forgetting it like 100 other movie scores? So here's a poll for you. And I really want to see what side you fall on. Should film composers obey the director's vision completely? Or should they rebel and go rogue when they feel it's right? Drop your vote in the comments. And if you've been following Breakdown Epic, you know I always read the comments, even the ones roasting me. Yes, I saw that one guy saying my voice made him want to drink 3 espressos and scream at the moon. You're not wrong, but still, tell me, loyalty or rebellion, which wins in art? Let's go deeper. Air's Redux soundtrack isn't just about fixing sound quality, it's about memory. The original 2000 release etched itself into the culture. For some people, hearing it instantly takes them back to their teenage bedroom, watching Coppola's film on a VHS tape, maybe even sneaking it past their parents. For others, it was the first soundtrack that felt like an album, not just background noise. But now, Air is challenging those memories. They're saying, what if the version you fell in love with was wrong? What if the emotions you tied to that sound were tied to a ghost? It's unsettling, right? It's like someone telling you the diary you've been reading for years was actually written in the wrong ink. And here's the real copy. Does it make your memories fake? Or does it add a new layer of truth? Personally, I think it makes the nostalgia richer, stranger, more haunting. Exactly the way the Virgin Suicides was always meant to feel. Here's a callback for the OGs who've been following this channel since our video on Wednesday's music in Season 2. Remember how I said the right soundtrack can completely rewrite how you experience a story? This is Exhibit A. Coppola gave us her version of the Lisbon Sisters tragedy. Air gave us another, parallel, darker, more secretive. And now, with Redux, they've finally aligned their music with the vision they always carried in their heads. But don't think this story ends with nostalgia. In their interview, Air hinted at something much bigger. Yes, they're celebrating the past, but they're also teasing the future. Benoît Dunckel admitted the energy of their audience, the way new fans regenerate every 10 years, is pushing them toward creating something entirely new. Nicolas Godin even said, I want to finish this and sleep for 2 months, and then think of the future. That's not retirement talk. That's the sound of a band cautiously circling the idea of resurrection. Imagine it, Air returning not just to celebrate what they once were, but to redefine themselves again for a new generation. And if that happens, it'll be because fans kept their faith alive for 25 years. Because people didn't just treat the Virgin Suicides as a soundtrack, they treated it as scripture. So let's wrap this with one last thought experiment. If Air really does reunite for new music, should they chase the dreamy safety of Moon Safari? Or should they double down on the darker, stranger path carved by the Virgin Suicides? Personally, I say go strange. Go dangerous. Give us something that feels like it doesn't belong in a lounge bar ever again. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Because your take might just be the energy that convinces them to dive back in. And here's my closing meme-level confession: if Air drops new music and it sounds like corporate hotel lobby background, I'll roast them harder than Netflix's live-action Cowboy Bebop. No mercy. But until then, I'm Sofia, this is Breakdown Epic, and you just uncovered the forbidden secrets of Air's haunted masterpiece. If you stayed this long, you're already part of the cult audience, keeping this story alive. And honestly, that makes you more powerful than you know.